Well, I think the important thing to understand is that this tribunal over the past year has performed the most comprehensive and most systematic interrogation of the evidence around the Uyghur crisis that exists, more than any government has. And having probed all of that evidence, they have come to a very firm conclusion that the PRC is perpetrating a genocide upon Uyghurs and other minorities. That is of extreme significance because governments haven't wanted to act. They haven't wanted to engage with their obligations under the Genocide Convention to defend Uyghurs. And what this judgment does is it sweeps away all the excuses and it says, look, we have the evidence. It is clear. You must now act.
But it has no power to impose penalties or sanctions. So tell us a bit more about what action can be taken now and why it was important to hold this tribunal.
Well, that's exactly right. Unfortunately, this tribunal shouldn't have happened or had to happen at all. Government should have done it rather than leaving it to civil society to come forward and create a tribunal. You know, the policy of governments around the world has been the determination of genocide is a matter for international courts, but there is no court that can hold China to account. There's no way of getting to one. So civil society had to do it. Having done it, yes, you're right, it's not binding upon governments. So politicians have got to take this thing and ensure that governments actually listen to it and that they act accordingly. But there are a few things that they can do, being as concrete as possible. They must now, on the basis of this evidence, sanction the individual officials involved, particularly Chen Guangguo, who was the architect of what's happened in Xinjiang, but also in Tibet. So there are many others that need sanctioning too. But I think more importantly, we've got to come together as a group of democratic nations and coordinate our reduction of dependency on China. Because unless there is something which hits the bottom line, we're not going to see a change in behavior.
So what do you make of China's response to this tribunal?
Right the way through the process, the PRC has tried to undermine the tribunal, has tried to attack the people involved in it, has sanctioned it, including some of the individuals involved. It's not at all surprising. You know, bearing in mind, a couple of years ago, they denied that they were doing anything wrong at all in the Uyghur region. They've had to move away from that because their own data suggests otherwise. It's obviously in their interests to undermine it, to discredit it, so that's what they're trying to do. Perfectly expected, but very disappointing. Very important to underline all the way through this process, the Uyghur Tribunal invited the Chinese governments to give an account of their testimony, to try to exculpate themselves, and they denied that opportunity at every turn.
Well, the UK has joined a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics over human rights concerns. What impact do you think this will have on Beijing?
It's mainly a symbolic impact, if truth be told, but a very important one. Because sending our diplomats and government representatives to smash a bottle of champagne over the genocide games in Beijing, it sends a terrible signal. You can't, on the one hand, be saying that you think a nation might be perpetrating a genocide, or in the words of our Foreign Secretary, mass torture, and then send your diplomats along to enable a big propaganda coup to happen. I would ask your viewers to cast their minds back to Beijing 2008. There was a lot of complaints before those Olympics by human rights organizations because of what's happening in Tibet, but no one remembers that. They remember the huge opening ceremony, the 1.4 billion people who watched that. We cannot allow that to happen again with Beijing next year, and that's why that it's right that our governments stay away.
And finally, what specifically would you like to see happen where human rights are concerned in China?
We need to see the camps closed. We need to see freedom of religion respected and Uyghurs allowed to go about their daily business, to worship the God that they want to worship, and to assemble in the way that they ought to be able to under all human rights declarations and conventions that China is supposed to be signed up to. That isn't going to happen, I believe, without significant external pressure. I think the problem we've got is that as the world has continued to open its markets, it has enabled the abuse of the PRC. And the stronger that they get economically, the more abusive they've become. We can't do this anymore. We've got to have a change of heart in the Western world amongst democratic nations particularly, and say, that's it, enough. We're going to reduce our dependency upon you. And if that's the thing that causes you to change your tack when it comes to human rights in China, good, so be it.
Luke de Pulford, good to talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you.